Alf, why do you talk so much? Frank, are we rolling? Oh, what's going on, sports card hobby family? We are back. It is another day. It is another sports card video. We've got some juicy vintage card talk coming up today. It's going to be interesting. There was a recent discussion between John Mangini and Dave Blue Jacket 66. We're going to dive right into that. But before I get started, we've got our first ever card showcase. I announced this going back last week, I believe, or maybe it was the week before. No, it was last week. We are going to be doing promotions for folks that are running cards on auctions, or maybe you have an eBay store, or maybe you're taking cards to a show and just want to announce that to viewership, and for a small fee, we can do that for you. And so without further ado, out of West Georgia, we have got a 1993 finest basketball uncut sheet sitting on Heritage Auctions. Unbelievable. I know all the 90s basketball folks are going to be like, holy smokes. And to pair it, we've got a 1993 Topps Finest baseball refractor uncut sheet sitting on Heritage right now. $5,000 bid currently on Heritage Auctions. It's believed to be the only one that's ever been found, that baseball Topps 93 Finest refractor uncut sheet. Pretty unbelievable. I'm going to put links to the auction in the video description as well as in the pinned comments, so make sure you check them out. Pretty awesome stuff. And then secondly, we've got Jay. I'll put his IG up here. Jay, heavy focus on graded vintage non-sports type stuff. A lot of it being Disney. He's got all sorts of different things, but man, the one thing that sticks out and what he wanted to showcase today that he's going to be taking to the Investabilia.com show in Dallas this coming weekend, the Investabilia show in Dallas this coming weekend. They will be at B6, so make sure to check out B6 if you're over there in Dallas. But we can all probably agree that of all the iconic brands going back through U.S. history and frankly globally, Disney is probably number one, and I don't even think it's really close, especially now that they've added Star Wars, they've added Marvel to their string of content and IP that they own. Disney is king, and it started way back when, of course, in the 30s. Many people focus on this card in particular. This is the Walt Disney rookie card, if you will, from 1931. There's a lot of focus on this particular card, but what a lot of people don't realize is there's character cards going back to the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, 60s, 70s, Disney character cards that go way back. There's a lot of emphasis here on this new, what is it, Cacao or whatever, this new brand of Disney cards, the shiny chrome stuff. And what a lot of people, again, don't realize is there is some seriously cool vintage cards. So for the vintage card collectors that also collect entertainment cards, or maybe this could be something new to you, definitely check out Jay if you do see him at the Investabilia show for these Disney cards. But then also, again, I'm going to put his IG back up here. Again, you can reach out to him with questions. He's an active buyer, seller, trader of these sorts of cards, and he's got extensive inventory and overall just a good guy. All right, let's dive into the meat and potatoes here. We've got John Mangini and Dave Blue Jacket 66. They had a conversation around altered cards, and they're talking about vintage cards mainly. It's always a hot topic in the card space. Alteration, cleaning cards, trimming cards, restoring cards. Trading cards is one part of collectibles where folks are very sensitive about restoration, altering, cleaning, and that sort of thing compared to maybe comic books. We go to like vintage comic books, Silver Age keys, Golden Age keys, perfectly fine to press and clean them and do whatever you need to before you grade them or crack them out and do that sort of thing. But man, when it comes to trading cards, there is a lot of differing opinions, but people are a lot more sensitive about what's going on with their trading cards.
You know, as the sports card market explodes, where are they going to try to make their money? Who are these bad apples? Where are they going to try to do it? And where they have done it in the past is they have trimmed cards. And that's part of the reason why I have lower end graded vintage cards for that purpose. Part of it's budget, of course. I don't have $10,000 to drop on one. The other part though is my mindset is that, okay, how likely is a PSA 3 to be trimmed? Maybe it's, maybe it was a 1 and they trimmed it and now it's a 3, but I think it's probably more likely that they had cards that were a 3 that they got to a 7.
And so Dave plays more devil's advocate. I think they probably agree on the majority of this stuff, but to create a debate, he even says in the video, and I'll put a link, Midlife Crisis kind of moderated this, did it very well, Midlife Crisis Cards. did a very good job moderating this. Or maybe it's just midlife cards. I always think midlife crisis. But anyway, midlife cards, I'll put a link to this interview or kind of this debate in the video description as well to check out. But both guys have been collecting vintage cards for decades. They could probably grade cards themselves just for how many they've looked at, they've touched, all that sort of thing. They've looked at all these different sets. They have a vast knowledge of the vintage card space. And so the topic isn't new, obviously, for them. I'll throw an opinion out there that's probably not going to be popular. But when I think of vintage cards, and I'm going to make a comparison to modern, even though they are apples and oranges, there are a lot of risks in buying into vintage cards, and this is kind of what we're talking about today. With modern cards and ultra-modern cards, the big risk is the athlete going to work out? You have no idea how the career is going to go. Are they going to get in trouble? Are they going to get injured? There's all sorts of variables that are against you if you're trying to buy and hold modern and ultra-modern cards. With vintage, of course, you've already seen the ending. You already know how the career is going to go, so it's much easier to pick cards of players where, and you see all the time, like, why are you buying XYZ player? Why don't you just buy, this Hall of Famer that's already established the career? And it does make sense from the standpoint of it's way, way more safe, in quotation marks, to buy vintage when we're talking about players. But when it comes to condition and the risk of alteration, the risk of restoration, the risks are far more on the vintage side than they are on the modern side. And I know we've seen instances where a couple of years ago, I remember there was Trey Lance autograph cards that were sitting in holders. They were graded holders and they were trim cards. They found that they were trim. So they're trimming and they're screwing around with ultra modern as well. But if we're looking at it big picture, of course, most would agree that just the fact that these are older cards, they've been around for decades and decades and decades, switched hands, all these dealers have had them, and back before the internet, where you had the internet sleuths that could figure this stuff out, assume a lot of this was going on 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and now, it's being found in collections and it's being sent off to grading, so this is a very tricky subject. It's not easy, it's not cut and dry. Much of the discussion kind of goes around in circles, again, moderated really well, but again, it's kind of going back and forth. They're trying to, concede as to what's ethical and what's not ethical, soaking cards, and again, I can't figure out halfway through this talk which parts Dave is just playing devil's advocate and which parts he actually does believe, because he's kind of playing a character, but then also throwing in, but I don't think that you should do this or that. So I was trying to figure that out half the time. I do understand what they were trying to do, trying to figure out what is ethical, what is not ethical. It's a fairly universal belief that cutting a card, trimming a card, or touching it up, painting it, restoration, these are clear alterations of the card. Where it gets a little bit more kind of hazy is where you're cleaning a card. Some people think it's perfectly okay to clean a card with some sort of a substance or some sort of a chemical. And some people think, hey, you can wipe it down with a cloth, with a microfiber cloth, and that is it. One interesting tidbit that they had talked about, it might have been a separate conversation, but Orlando, A Collector's Dream, another great YouTube channel, it talks about his collection quite a bit and his journey. But he was talking about a graded card that he owned that was sitting in a holder. It was a graded card, and it looked great. Turns out that there was a stain that was originally on that card that must have been cleaned that was coming back. So years later, there was this stain that was starting to appear on the card. And I don't know what grade the card was sitting in. I don't know the holder or what number it was. But it's clear if they graded that today, if they regraded it, it would drop the grade. So it's something when you look at kind of card cleaning, and I don't know anything about what goes into that. But this was a vintage card that had been cleaned with some sort of a substance to get a stain off or enough to where you couldn't see it, and it came back. So this is something where years later, there could be an issue. And then, of course, it's sitting in that slab, so then what? But the biggest takeaway I took from a couple of these different conversations that I've been watching is these guys in particular are not going out, not that they don't have the money, but they're not going to go out and buy high dollar vintage cards. And I think that says a lot because, again, these guys are longtime collectors of this sort of thing. Now, in their collection, they do have high dollar cards. I think they do have 5-figure. I don't know if they have a 6-figure card, but I'm pretty sure they've got 5-figure cards that are within their collection, but they didn't pay 5 figures for it. They've just been collecting for so long, it's just gone up, and now here we are. My takeaway is these guys, and I would talk to them over anybody else. If I was looking at their buying patterns, I would look at them over anybody else in the space as people that know what they're talking about vintage cards. and they're not spending huge money on it. They're not going to take the risk. And so if they're not going to take the risk, then I will probably stay with kind of my usual deal, 3s, 4s, 5s. I'm okay with fuzzy corners. I'm hoping for good registration, good centering, and that's really going to be my focus with vintage. Again, it's to each their own. It's not to say if you're looking for sharp corners that you're some sort of an idiot. Everyone collects and speculates, invests however they want to, but this was a very good conversation from people that have been doing it a long time, buying these cards and handling them, knowing what to see, what looks off. And I thought it was very just telling that they were not in a huge hurry, even though they probably have the money to do it, to go in and get cards that they really want, but not worth the risk. But anyway, check out that conversation. I will put the video link in my video description. It was a very, very good talk/debate. All right, friends, stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.